Welcome to Dice and Mind, a podcast hosted by Brad Brown and Jason Kaufman to explore the intersection of life, games, science, music, philosophy, and creativity through interviews with leading creatives. All are welcome in this space.
I think this is the first time that we are dropping, in effect, for those that are Christian, a holiday episode, since this is Christmas Day, the 25th. So for those that celebrate, Merry Christmas. And here's your gift from us, a fresh episode of Dice and Mind with a really cool guest.
Yeah.
We've been talking about this now for a couple of weeks, how it can be tough for the end of the year for many. 2023 was, and I think you said it before we hit record. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times, to quote Tale of Two Cities, Dickens. That truly is the case for obviously here at my house, yours at your house, and I know for many others. And I think this idea, you and I have talked about this idea of, even when we were talking about business, I think we've referred to it even more recently, the idea of hope.
Yeah.
How does hope is a fuel, I think, in the business world, and empathy and compassion can drive that. I think hope is something that can drive someone personally, and being able to be introspective and look at, if you're hovering and hanging around the things that have been challenging to you and not looking at your successes, it's very hard to have that type of hope.
Yeah. And I think, to complement our discussion from last week, and it's relevant to hope, is the importance of having meaning, of finding meaning in life, of sometimes intentionally creating meaning in life. It has to be there. It's from the successes as well as the setbacks. It's not so much about reality as it is finding meaning in that reality. And so that kind of brings us to today's topic. Not too long ago, I came across an article in Scientific American, and it was so interesting. And I remember I sent it to you. I think I grabbed the PDF, I sent it to you. I'm like, you need to read this, because this is the stuff we've been talking about, and we ought to invite this guy to chat with us. And the whole little article, which I actually read online, was about Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, right? This notion that if you look across cultures over time, there's this pretty universal trend in great stories about essentially the quote-unquote hero who is set with major adversity, in a sense dies because of it, but in other words, because of course it's misogynistic, or better, their identity is challenged. It reforms as they psychologically navigate the challenge, and they come out, right? They come out kind of through this mini apotheosis, a new and newly formed person, but one whose life is imbued with meaning. And we see this, man, we see this everywhere. We see this, I'm reaching a bit here.
If you read it, it will be very difficult not to see this theme so many places you never would have thought.
And it is an ancient concept, and I'm making some connections here that may or may not be legit. Okay, I'm going to own that. But even looking at the research of Julien Douy, this French researcher who has, it's just amazing how he's done this, because he's done this empirically with data. But you look at the stories of the constellations of the stars, and how
Mm,
those stories, we've talked about this, but not for some time,
yeah.
and how those stories seem to span the cultures of the globe and can be traced back um almost genetically, but through words, through memes,
Yeah.
tens of thousands of years. And so things like the hunter, for example, like we in the West would look
Orion.
at Orion,
Orion.
exactly.
Yeah.
Um, or other things around the Pleiades. But like with the hunter, this is a notion that can be traced back mathematically with his tools 20, 30, 40 plus
I was,
thousand years ago. I mean, that is humbling to me, and that's invigorating to me, and I derive meaning from that. And so back to your point about hope, right? That so much hope is available when we look at the lens of life through meaning, and maybe vice versa. And so to bring us then to our guest, um, Dr. Ben Rogers, who's a professor of I believe it's organization and management, right? Although
yeah.
he's social psychology background, um, he and his colleagues did research on this, looking at using the hero's journey as an intervention. They actually taught people to reframe their life story through Campbell's lens, albeit a simplified one, of the hero's journey of you are the hero and you have vanquished this great threat, which might just be paperwork at the office. But it's all about how you tell the story to yourself.
And I think the one thing, um, you and I knew this because we talked about this before going into the interview, and talking with Ben, which was absolutely fascinating.
That's
I would
fun.
ask those of you who are listening, um, listen to the discussion, but think about the application personally,
Yeah, to your own life.
professionally, to your own life. Because I believe, I'm not going to say I think, I believe that this could be, um, profoundly life changing in a positive way if you go through this type of exercise. Even if you go through it on your own, you don't have to show anyone. It gives yourself, it allows you a time to focus and evaluate yourself honestly. And, you know, a lot of us like to focus on failures or negatives.
Yeah.
This really helped to look at both and see how both, you alluded to this or you said this
Yeah.
before, how the mixture of both made who you are. And you and I've talked about this forever. I'm even probably broadening it further, and then we'll go. I think it should help you all realize that every one of us has value.
Professor Benjamin Rogers' research explores the meaning of work and narratives in the workplace, specifically the way that stories we tell manifest in our organizational experiences to shape our well-being. His work particularly focuses on how these narratives can be used to design effective and scalable psychological interventions to help workers, and people more broadly, to find more meaning and improve their well-being. His findings have included how a growth mindset can lead employees to help others at work, what leads workers to conclude their boss has naively fallen for flattery, and how seeing your personal narrative as similar to a hero's journey can give life and work more meaning. All right, so Ben, thank you so much for spending a little time with us. Like I said before we clicked record, we were just kind of floored, a little bit mesmerized by the article you co-authored in Scientific American on the hero's journey. It was hard to believe anyone did research on it.
Yeah, no, I'm so excited to be here and talk about the research. I agree in one sense that this was this idea that I had because I've always been interested in storytelling, and it connected well with my research broadly, which I'm sure we'll get into. But the idea that this really storytelling based idea would actually have like long legs in sort of scientific and psychological research was something we're really excited about.
And
Yeah.
I think, I think it's important. I know we talked beforehand about whether you do a lot of gaming or not. I think that doesn't matter just because
Right.
what you're studying, researching, and what you've published, um, I think sits above that for those that actually game. So, from my perspective, thank you for taking the time because I think this is a subject that needs more attention in the gaming world alone, if not from a broader perspective. If you don't mind, before we get into the article,
Yeah.
We were talking about this beforehand. For my background is in business, I have an MBA. What is, just because you were talking about it and I couldn't get a word in with Jason, um, social psychology.
Mm-hmm.
What is that for those of us who don't necessarily understand what that means?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'm sort of an interesting person to answer it because I'm actually a professor in organizational behavior. So I actually sit in a business school
Yeah.
and I study predominantly psychology at work. But my training and a lot of my interests also span social psychology, which I'll explain in just a second. So I kind of the worlds bleed into each other. But the idea is psychology is generally, about what people think, how they feel, emotions, all those types of things. And social psychology is sort of how does that work with any social type dynamic? So how do people see others, react to others, work with others, view themselves within the world? And then the way it bleeds into my work is I essentially do social psychology, but with work-focused topics. So how do people find meaning and meaningfulness in their work is a primary interest of mine. And the paper, while it's that we'll be talking about is broadly life focused, it also has a couple career focused studies and some studies that sort of speak to work related issues more broadly. But social psychology at its basic is psychology, but within groups, social dynamics, all those types of things.
I think we could probably have you back. I'm gonna say something that I usually say at the end, but I'm gonna say it now. We have to have you back on just because the organizational and business stuff just
Yeah.
touches the exactly the realm where I just have fascination. I don't have a psychology degree, but being a leader and everything like that, it's just that's an area that I could listen for hours.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Whenever I have to explain what I do, I always say I study psychology at work. And so then I list off, leadership, teamwork, those types of things. So it's exactly the space that I agree. It's my interest. It's what I've dedicated my career to. So I couldn't agree more.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's so cool. So, okay, so on that note, then, to pivot a little bit into your work, especially the work that attracted us. So, meaning, you had us both at meaning. Where Brad and I talk a lot about meaning in life, meaning at work, meaning in leadership, whatever, offline. Personally, we've been friends for a very long time. And increasingly, we wanted to talk about that on the podcast. So in Scientific American, very recently, you and your co-authors, Kurt Gray, Mike Christian, and obviously there are others on the paper itself, many others, big endeavor. You had this neat article come out in Scientific American, and it's got this irony-laden title, To Lead a Meaningful Life, Become Your Own Hero. Which is funny because, you also clearly are interested in not just meaning, but, looking at your other work, humility and not letting the ego grow too big and all those good things. And so your research, this specific study and the highly accessible, engaging, and colorful piece in Scientific American, it's about using Campbell's hero's journey as an intervention for a more meaningful life. And the damnedest part is empirically across a series of studies, some more robust than others, you actually demonstrated it worked. Like this can be done in a, no pun intended, meaningful way. I'm wondering if you could just give us, for our listeners, just like the 2-bit version, and then maybe we could talk about how you actually did it.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So just to take a very brief definitional standpoint as an academic, that's always important, is so the hero's journey is this story structure identified by Joseph Campbell, who you referenced, And, it underlies a lot of stories going back from ancient myths to any superhero popular movie today, as well as, role-playing games, all those types of things we've alluded to. There's this story, this sort of plot line that underlies a lot of that. And at its most basic, we identify sort of 7 elements of it. The idea that there's a protagonist, a hero, they have some moment of shift, which sends them off on a different adventure. They're on a quest of some sort, so they're seeking out a goal. They meet allies, they face challenges, and then as a result of facing those challenges, they transform into something better, stronger, kinder, all those types of things. And then they end up coming back to their home community to benefit society. So that's the plot line in its basic form. And so what we do in the paper is I'd say there's 3 very quick sections, and I won't go into detail because we can dive into it. So in the first, we boil down Joseph Campbell's original version of the hero's journey. So his was 17 steps. And that's it was many steps. And then also some of them are a little more outdated. It's not quite the right word, but women as temptress, these types of things that may go back 50, 100 years maybe were a little more common. So we modernized it, and then we also boiled it down to a scale, so a measurable scale where we could ask people, to what extent do you have these 7 elements in your life? And then after that first section, then we went into a second where we just gave it to people and said, if your life is like this, if you have these elements of this story, does your life feel very meaningful? And across a number of studies, we showed that there was a really strong relationship between the two. But as you alluded to, that's not, correlation is not causation, all of those types of ideas. It could be the case that people who just happen to have really great lives answer positively to both. And so that's where we took the next step in the final set of studies, where we took those 7 elements of the hero's journey, and we made a quick writing intervention. So we helped people to identify the elements in their life. So for example, like with shift, we asked people, what's a time when you faced a new experience that kind of led you to where you are today? We did that across the 7 elements. Then we showed that to people, and comparing that to a control sort of reflection task, we found that when people restoried their life, when they identified how their life was like a hero's journey, they actually felt their life was more meaningful, they felt more resilient, and a whole host of things. And so that's the paper at its most basic of, the 3 sections, making it into sort of something we can measure, showing that there's a relationship, and then developing the intervention to really show in sort of a robust causal way that telling your story in this way makes it to a more meaningful.
What impresses me is how simple the intervention is.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It doesn't sound like this is like I mean, obviously I read the paper, and I've been so looking forward to this chat because I kept looking for like, okay, but what did they actually do? There's got to be more, but in fact, you pretty much just spell it out in the paper, don't you? I mean, these were just essentially, and if I'm wrong, you got to correct me here. These were essentially just fairly straightforward, curated writing prompts of just getting people thinking reflectively for each of these stages.
Absolutely, yeah. It took a little bit of refining, but there were very few, probably our second or third try is when we started getting it to where we wanted it to be. And that's fairly unheard of in terms of the type of intervention I work. Often you need to refine these things over a bunch of studies, but we were struck by, just helping people sit, reflect, take a moment to identify the elements, just, answering 2 to 3 sentences per question, and then showing them, this is what the story of your life is so far, actually, and how we didn't brief them on what the hero's journey was. We didn't detail that it was this really meaningful thing. We literally just identified the elements, gave it to people, and we have a lot of very open-ended qualitative responses where people were like, I never realized all these things that I've done, or how, much my trajectory has changed me and how I'm now benefiting because of the journey that I was on. So it's one of those ideas that I think is simple, but also surprisingly powerful just by helping people identify and connect to this story. It seems to have, pretty compelling psychological effects.
Go for it, Brad.
No, I can, again, I'm a little myopic just in terms of how I could see this from both a personal and a business perspective. And, I'm in a transition. So selfishly, I'm going to talk about me for a second. I'm in a transition. So it's very easy, especially at the holiday times, for folks who may have had a rough 2023, to be down. And I could see the application of this. And I think this is where it really drew us, change people's perspectives on themselves at a time in their life where we're flipping the calendar again. And, in effect, hopefully change their outlook and have them hopeful for a better year. And obviously year is, that's arbitrary. We have, December 31st to January 1st is an arbitrary date, but for most people, that's a big deal. Do you see this, just again, personal question, do you see this as beneficial in a business environment if you're doing like a seminar or you're working with organizations to drive more positive productivity? I've always believed that people work better if they have hope. And you need to find their fuel that drives that for them to be productive. And sometimes people don't understand that when I hire. Do you see this as positively applicable in a business, whether it's a seminar, whether it's a self-study, whatever the case may be for folks?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're doing some follow-up work to specifically sort of extend this more deeply into the business world. So like I mentioned in the paper, we have one study on where we have people, instead of retelling or restoring their life journey as a hero's journey, we have them restory their career journey as a hero's journey. So we ask them, reflecting on your career so far, what was the moment of shift that led you to the position you're in right now? What are some challenges you faced in your career? All those types of things. And what we show in that study are effects that are really in line with our other ones, of people found their work more meaningful. They were more satisfied with their work. They felt more resilient to face challenges. So all of those things that apply in the life domain also apply in the work domain. And we're doing a study right now where we're in the midst of collecting it, where we're actually working with a social work group. And how, it's a perfect context because, what they do is so challenging and strenuous and often doesn't pay off with, they're not going to solve whatever social problem that they're doing. They're trying to better people's lives. And, there's a sense of positive impact, but there's also this sense of their journey keeps going. And so we've developed an intervention of helping them seeing their ongoing journey as a hero's journey, so that we can hopefully help, reduce emotional exhaustion, reduce burnout, all these types of things that, you referenced in your question, that people get really mired in the day-to-day experiences and then the negative emotions and rumination, all of these things. And, it happens with me as well. And so helping people take a step back and, not do this in a fantastical way, not say your problems don't exist, you're amazing, but helping them identify in like really authentic ways of their life, how do these elements already exist in your life? And then showing these stories that you love, that you pay money to go see in movies or pay for streamers, your life story contains so many of the same elements, as does your work story. And so we're just helping people sort of contextualize that a little bit more and, take that step out of their current experience.
I just want to say something about that. I think that's such a crucial point. And I don't think, at least in this country, in the West in general, I don't think people understand that and they don't talk about it. Meaning is not the same as valence, right? There's nothing in here that says you have a good life, you have a bad life, right? Sometimes things suck and they're meaningful. And so this isn't right. It's not Pollyanna-ish. Like you said, it's not fantastical. This isn't about feeling good. This isn't about feeling bad or rating anything in terms of is it positive or negative. This is discovering the meaning that's waiting for you to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And to get a little sort of narrative nerdy
please.
in our conversation is, the most compelling stories are ones with stakes and with challenges and with troubles. And, that's not to say you should go have terrible experiences to get positive meaning out of it. But life is challenging, but that's also often what makes it meaningful. And helping sort of give people that sense of meaning is to not dismiss the challenge and the stakes, but it's to connect it to broader values that they might have, or to the way that they grew or were resilient in the end.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I could see this just from whether it's life or business, seeing those challenges, and whether you failed at them or were successful at them, you've learned from them. And as leaders, you can use this as a learning experience for staff. I think we have a problem in this country where, you can learn from failure in business. You see this in startups. Startups are really good at that culture. But as soon as you leave that startup phase, people have decision paralysis because they absolutely don't understand what you're talking about. And the good and the bad can drive their experience and who they are. Have you, and again, this is relatively new. I see this as, you're in the stages now where this could be transformative in an environment, whether it's personal or professional, that drives hope. And again, I mentioned that before. Have you been getting feedback from folks even outside of your arena about, what they're, just feedback in general as to what they think?
Yeah, it's been a bit of a wild journey, for lack of a better term, particularly since the Scientific American article came out, which I think really helped sort of get it into, and the Time article as well. Since those came out, it really, I think, helped broaden our reach. And what's been, the people from the academic world reaching out and saying, "Oh, great paper, and can we use your scale?" Like that's validating in its own right. But I think the things that have been really like humbling is, like, I've had a number of therapists reach out and say, like, I want to incorporate aspects of this into my practice, actually with clients. What ways do you think that would make sense or not make sense? I've had people who just are fans of storytelling, and even some people who studied under Joseph Campbell reach out and say,
Wow.
I was really touched by the way that you're incorporating his ideas into your research. And so the breadth of the reach has been really amazing and very humbling, in the sense of, my job is to show, that sort of the causality aspect of it, show that restoring your life in this way has certain predictable effects that we can replicate. That's not like the sexiest way of phrasing it, but then seeing people take it and going, like, I'm actually going to use this with clients of people who are facing personal issues, whatever. It makes me nervous in one sense, but it also makes me very excited that these ideas really are resonating with a lot of people, and people who are experienced in sort of leveraging these types of things with clients in a way that can hopefully help people down the road.
For however little it's worth, I'll say, Ben, because this was the other ulterior reason I wanted to talk to you. We wanted to talk to you because not just this is so clearly relevant to tabletop RPGs, because it's like, look at what this is showing. Like, here's empirical evidence that this can be a healing, healthy process, and we're big believers in that. And there are others we've talked to over the past couple of years who are actively using, right, RPGs to engage in therapy, especially with kids, but also adults. But as a licensed psychologist, I 100% agree with what you just said. I I saw the Siam piece, and then I picked up the article, and it was like, okay, you guys have basically, not to be overly simplified here, but you guys have basically rediscovered cognitive behavioral therapy from the outside through a narrative stance, because that's what you're talking about. And so I do think this has legs, and total transparency. Like, I've been racking my brain for months now on finished a field study a couple months ago, but along the way I started thinking about the next step, and it's like, but how to do it? And I saw your scale, or at least what I've seen from the paper. It's like, oh, that's how to do it, right? This would actually work. So I think it's really well deserved. I think it's super cool. Okay, switching a little bit here, being mindful of time. In the paper and in the Siam article, there's a fair amount of nerdiness. Another thing we found very intriguing positively. Yeah, Brad's giving 2 thumbs up for our audio audience.
Mhm.
There's a fair amount of nerdiness, right? You mentioned Lord of the Rings, you mentioned Frodo and the Shire, you mentioned Star Wars. So okay, gotta ask, who in this group of 10, right? Who's the geeky one?
Hmm.
I would say it's a tie between me and Kurt Gray. We were sort of the two who started on this work, and different people have different interests and elements, and
Yeah,
the team was amazing, but
yeah.
Kurt and I were the ones who are really foundational to this. Me, I think, from a very nerdy storytelling aspect of it. And then Kurt also is interested in the storytelling, but he actually plays a lot of role-playing games himself. So he was very jealous that I was coming on here.
That's great.
But yeah, he's more of the Lord of the Rings. I'm more of a Star Wars angle. And so we sort of meet in the middle.
Beautiful thing. Beautiful thing. Both.
I think, yeah, and I think I mean, obviously that'll resonate. We don't always talk about gaming. We talk about, faith, life, whatever the case is. And I think that's why this is so important. I know too, I don't want to sound like I'm fawning, but I've studied productivity just as a layperson over the years and how people can become more productive. And, like these days, the hot item is like bullet journaling. And I could see someone incorporate this into their bullet journaling exercise and create better opportunities for themselves to become more productive. Their journaling perspective, their task management, all those type of minutia can be driven by an exercise like this. And from my understanding, I think you've kind of alluded to it before, this isn't a 2-day exercise. This isn't a 5-day exercise. This is something they can incorporate in, spend a few minutes each day or spend a couple hours and get through it. I think there's real value in doing that. And the fact that, you're referencing Lord of the Rings and Star Wars, and I'm trying to get Jason to play the Lord of the Rings role-playing game.
It's on the way.
I think it only helps, even personally, it helps me get Jason on the table.
Anything other than Star Trek?
Yeah, I mean, and Jason's. I mean, we're old enough that we were very young when A New Hope came out.
Hardcore into Star Wars. Yeah.
We were not quite kindergarten age when that came out. So for us, we grew up when the prequels came out. We were all excited. When the sequel trilogy came out, we were all excited. So kudos for incorporating that, because I think it'll resonate with folks too.
Yeah, it's I think I'm just really interested in storytelling broadly. So to really show my nerdy cards as storytelling aspects is, I can't count the number of screenwriting books that I've read, and I've never written a screenplay. I don't have any immediate plans to do it. I'm just so interested in the craft of it. And really that's I've had these ideas about story structure in the back of my mind, stemming a lot from, I was really obsessed with the show Community when I was young, younger, not that young. And Dan Harmon, the showrunner, he has this sort of 8-segment story structure, story cycle that he's sort of known for. And it's essentially a hero's journey. And so that was sort of my exposure to the idea that stories have structure, that you can, use these formulas, quote unquote, but imbue them with emotion and with meaning and with character and interestingness, and they can make these endlessly exciting stories. And that's just been in my brain. And then I was fortunate enough to enter a career where I'm studying meaning, I'm studying meaningfulness, and stories are just such a powerful way that people make meaning. And so I'm able to use this nerdy storytelling aspect of my brain for good, I guess, for lack of a better term, and study, really test out these ideas and see if they hold up empirically.
So cool. Ben, thank you so much for being with us. It was just such an interesting discussion with Ben. And I know I don't actually remember how much I said about this while we were interviewing, and then we stuck around with him for a while after we clicked stop on the recording and really kept going. But I think what he and his colleagues did inadvertently is almost rediscover CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, from the outside looking in. And
Oh,
he got that, right? And so they're not clinicians, but that's essentially
can
what
you
they found.
just for
Hmm.
people like me, brief, what is CBT? Just
Yeah,
so that
thanks. So I suspect quite a few of our listeners, i.e., four, but I suspect that quite a few of our listeners have heard of this, are familiar with it. If you have ever been in therapy, if you've ever done any psychotherapy, raise your hand. Don't worry, we can't see you. It's an audio podcast. So if yeah, Brad's raising his hand. And then flipping
and I'm
me
raising
off.
a finger
I'm
and
not sure how that.
raising a hand and a finger, but go ahead.
So I guess the therapy wasn't all that
No,
effective.
it wasn't.
So, but more seriously, we don't mean to make light of it, but
No.
if you've ever had psychotherapy, there's a pretty good chance it was CBT, everybody. So, cognitive behavioral therapy is very well established in the research. It's the number one approach to therapy that's taught these days, and it's been that way for a while. It's not the only approach, but it's the number one approach. And in a nutshell, instead of trying to teach someone insight, it focuses on teaching them, helping them to recognize their habits of thought and their habits of action. Kind of like when I walk into the kitchen, even though I'm just going for a cup of tea. Right. I don't know why I walked out with a box of cookies, but there we are. And
Yeah.
so what CBT does is it focuses on increasing awareness of one's habits of thought, like this always happens to me. No, it doesn't. That's an error of thinking. Or, man, where did these cookies come from? I don't understand that at all. Sure you do. It's a habit of action, it's a pattern, and we want to interrupt it. And so that's what CBT is about in a very brief nutshell. Now we have the hero's journey. Think about it for a moment. Now we're saying, let's look at our lives, like you said, Brad, before we dropped the bio in the interview. Let's look at ourselves and our lives, but let's reframe the
Yes.
story we tell ourselves, and let's reframe it through the lens of, haha, I'm a hero. I have my sword. I have my phaser. I have my shields. I have my hope and my meaning. And the research, and this is the kicker, the research that Ben and others have done says this actually makes a difference. And this makes sense because the brain doesn't care about the separation between fantasy and reality. So why not tell ourselves, and I don't mean this as a joke, why
No.
not tell ourselves a better story about ourselves? Because we are likely to believe it and thereby feel better and thereby be better because of it.
That you made the, you know, obviously I'm not a clinician. I'm just thinking about this from a personal and
Yeah.
a professional perspective. And I think I said this. I think I said it. Maybe I didn't say it until after we stopped recording. Um, this is, and I alluded to this before. This is a great exercise. I think there would be value in doing this. I think I even asked them about, do they look at this as a potential future like seminar opportunity? I could see
Mm.
going through this exercise as a team,
Mm.
but personally, I think there's a real chance that whether you look at it as your life as a whole or just your professional context, Venn diagram, do you go for the whole or do you go for the part?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think it can change your outlook on yourself because, like I said before we cut over, sometimes as much as we say everyone has value, we are our own worst critics, and
Right.
we will think everybody else has value, but we don't.
Right.
Um,
That's right.
so you know, look at this beyond the idea of they have used storytelling and all this as just the coolest engine to drive something that can really drive positive mental health.
And in the Scientific American article, they introduce it through the lens of pop culture, Star
Yeah.
Wars, Lord of the Rings, etc. So people, they're talking to us.
So let's go over to the GM corner.
Well, here we are.
I kind of actually let's just be in the GM corner,
So
and just I'll hijack it real quick, just because I
yeah,
know that there have been some. I alluded to this in the last episode. Some holiday purchases that I probably won't talk about until January. There's just so much going on that I can't
yeah,
evaluate it.
yeah,
Um, with some of the professional stuff going on, I'm still behind on releasing some of our captain's log. So I actually put the captain's log book back on my side table in the family room,
ah,
to remind myself of it. And I think, to be honest with you, through the end of, for the next week or so,
yeah,
really has been the last 2 weeks.
yeah,
I think that's really going to be the focus. I think you and I have talked, and I don't know if I have the note up. This is kind of a spoiler in a way. We've talked about kind of the games that we wanted to
yeah.
focus on in 2024. And it goes without saying that Edge Studio Star Wars franchise, Edge of the Empire, Age of Rebellion, Force and Destiny, that's on there. Star Trek obviously is on
Always.
there. I think still Travelers Hanging out there.
Yeah, it does continue to call to me from the bookshelf.
Yeah, and the absolute worst thing you could do is to join the Traveler Facebook group, because
I had to get out.
I say that facetiously, because
yeah,
they talk about the science of the stuff in there, and it is unbelievable. So even if you aren't necessarily a gamer of it, go check out the Facebook. But I'm just trying to think. I think that we have the age system.
Yep.
That we're still going to play through.
Just some of my favorite dice, man.
Yes, and I have an article that I'll have to show you sometime, where someone did a mini research on I'm thinking of the wrong game. I'll go there next year or next time. But I love the 3D6 system. The article I'm talking about is for the narrative dice system, and comparing that to using a D12 dice pool.
Oh, you have to send me that.
Yeah, I saw it, and I saw it a couple weeks back, because one of our prior guests, Al Spader, messaged me. I didn't get a chance to even tell you this.
No.
He's working on some dice engine stuff, and he had me.
Cool.
He just asked a kind of a brief question about some of the math stuff. And Al, I think you're giving me way more credit than I deserve, but thank you.
Yeah, you really are, Al.
Yeah, really, he is. But it got the intellect flowing, and I was thinking about the difference between like a 3D6 and a narrative and a D20 and a 2D20.
Yeah.
And someone had wrote up.
I want to see that,
because they were trying to make this comparison that the narrative system really is the equivalent of like a D12 system, but with symbols. I haven't. I will send you the article. Just because the past, it's gotten lost in some of the other stuff we have going on, because obviously we are recording.
Intrigued.
We are recording this just a tad bit before.
Yeah, always,
the
of
holiday.
Course. Yep.
Yeah,
always.
So,
I want to see
long GM corner for me, but that's ultimately going into 2024.
Yeah.
We have a lot of games that are on the docket, and you and I were talking about guests. We have some really cool ideas for guests. I think this idea of us doing shorter episodes every other week, and then having a longer guest episode, seems to, we're still in that test period, but I'm feeling, I think I could say that for you, we're feeling pretty positive about it.
Yeah, that's right. That's just started up. I agree. I am too. Okay, so for GM Corner, my thing, and I'll keep this brief, because of what you've said, I'm totally changing what I was going to bring up.
Oh no, I'm so sorry.
No, actually I'm not. This is cool. I've talked about this before. Because you have the other half of this set. Those, so I have the 3D6 set for the Expanse, right?
Yep,
And they're gorgeous. I think we have the Earth blue and white set,
we do.
and they are aesthetically gorgeous dice. And as dorky as this is, and I own it, for several years now, I've just made it a habit when I travel, I typically will bring one like a die or a small set of dice, just because if I take them out, it gets me thinking.
Yeah.
Well, in this time next week, as we're recording, this is so a little before the end of the year, but this time next week, I'm going to be traveling for a while, as you know. And I wasn't planning this, but as soon as we're done recording, I'm going to go over to the bookshelf. I'm going to grab my 3D6 dice. I'm going to put it in the bag. And while I'm traveling, because I'm going to be, it's far enough and different enough that I will be thinking about different cultures and different modes of thought in the future. And having those dice there, even just to take out and hold and see for a moment, that gets, especially like on a plane, that really gets my thoughts going.
Well, and the idea that it's 3 6-sided die. You can go to an old Yahtzee game and grab 6-sided die.
Yeah.
And it's 3 of them. The idea of the stun system, I
Right.
don't want to terribly rehash everything we've talked about before. There's just something that has the allure of the age system.
It's very organic.
It's such a sandbox environment too.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and I think we've said from a high fantasy perspective, going into 2024, we were really going to kind of focus on second edition fantasy age.
Yeah.
As our high fantasy.
There you go. All right. Well, everybody, we've got to go because I've got to walk over to the bookshelf and grab those dice before I forget. As always.
Is that a euphemism?
Nope.
Okay. That would, well,
Nope.
wow.
Nope.
Okay. I had to push the envelope a little bit in this episode.
I'm just letting this stall out for a sec so
everyone
can finish their cringe.
I just you seeing his face, he's like, nope. Okay, I'm going to you.
Well, with that, in all seriousness, we especially mean it this evening as we wish you be well, stay well. For those of us in the Northern Hemisphere, these are the darkest months of the year in more than one way. And while some of us love it and thrive in it, many of us don't. So take care of yourselves, take care of one another, stay warm. We will see you next week.